Hello, and a very warm welcome from the studio in Madrid. I have the honor to present to you today, together with some of the co-auditors, co-authors, and some of the voices, our joint report, A Moment to Reflect, Creating Euro-Mediterranean Bonds That Deliver. I'm very lucky to be not the only one on this panel. I'm joined by Haysam Amira Fernandez, by Sana Fuez, and by Eduard Soler Ileche. My name is Carmen Decon. I'm project manager for the Mediterranean Dialogue at the Friedrich Naumann Foundation in Madrid. We've already heard from our directors from the three institutions that started this joint project. Well, what we had in mind, the idea that led to this great report. We're now going to discuss some of the recommendations, some of the outcomes, with those that have contributed to it. So before we kick off the discussion, I have the pleasure to present my co-panelists. So first of all, to my left, Haysam Amira, Senior Analyst for the Mediterranean and the Arab world at one of the partners for this joint report, the Ekano Royal Institute. You're also Associate Professor of International Relations at the EU School of Global and Public Affairs. You've published extensively on MENA affairs. You have lectured in Europe, in the US, and also in the MENA region, led several research projects, and among others, also worked for the United Nations. So we're very glad to have you here today for our discussion, but also as a contributor to the report.
My pleasure.
With us, we also have Eduard Soler, Senior Research Fellow from the other institution that we've partnered with for this report, the CEDAW, Barcelona Center for International Affairs. You're Senior Research Fellow at CEDAW and also part-time lecturer at the Universitat Autònoma de Barcelona. Among others, you've lectured at the prestigious Collège d'Europe in Bruges. You've also led various research projects, and you've been, as you just told me, seconded to the Spanish Ministry for Foreign Affairs to advise the Directorate General for the Mediterranean, the Maghreb, and the Middle East. Third person with us is Sana Fuez, which I'm going to present later on. But first of all, Haysam and Eduard, thank you very much for being here with us. Today, we are very honored to have you both as authors, as I said, but also as co-authors of this report, which we officially launched today. You see here the printed version. We also have a digital version, which we're going to put on the web and send out very soon. So stay tuned, connect to our joint platform, www.md-go.com, to stay tuned about further news. As I already said, we're going to discuss some of the recommendations live during today's Euro-MENA show. We will, so to say, kick off our Euro-Mediterranean debate today, because this is also the aim of this report. We want to go further of what we call the usual echo chambers. Our aim is not to keep this dialogue, our Euro-Mediterranean dialogue, within our TV studio, within the four of us. It shall go further, even further, and we really hope you will join our Mediterranean dialogue. I personally had the pleasure to accompany this project on behalf of FNF, which, and I have to be honest, is not a project of only the three or the four of us. It is actually a joint endeavor by your colleagues from Ekano Royal Institute, from CEDAW, whom I would like to thank very much for also your contributions to this report. And on top of that, there have been 14 interviewees that I have had the pleasure to speak to reflect upon Euro-Mediterranean bonds that also contributed to this report. And one of them, I'm coming to the last person on this panel, one of them is with us today, Sana Fuez, having traveled from Brussels, from Belgium actually. You are a founder and director of Womenpreneur Initiative. You're also an award-winning gender expert and women's advocate. The organization, Womenpreneur Initiative, is now already 5 years old. It's a community of 10,000 women in over 20 countries. You're giving them a voice. Your aim is to advance women's places in the entrepreneurial scene, technology, innovation, and society. So you're very actually very, very knowledgeable person and voice to contribute to our Euro-Mediterranean dialogue, because your initiative is active both in Europe and in the MENA region, and I'm sure we're going to hear more about this later on. I couldn't be more proud of this stellar panel of Euro-Mediterranean experts and practitioners, and without further ado, I would like to really properly kick off our debate. I would like to invite the audience, all of you following us here today live, to submit your questions to our panelists through www.md-go.com. We're going to have a Q&A later on, and you can also, I forgot to mention this, you can select your question. So we're having those discussions in English and Spanish today. We're now going to take really a closer look at our report. So you'll see that the title is A Moment to Reflect, Creating Euro-Mediterranean Bonds That Deliver. Hi, Sam. I would like to start with reflecting upon the first part of this title, A Moment to Reflect. So we have to travel back into the past. Where are we actually coming from? Could you maybe briefly draw the picture of the past years, 10 years, 20 years, 25 years of Euro-Mediterranean relations?
Okay, well, thank you very much, Carmen. Thank you for the great work that you've done as co-editor of this report. It's been a pleasure working with FNF and with our friends and colleagues from CEDAW on this project. So where are we coming from? Well, one of the reasons why we started this project, or we thought it would be useful to produce a report, was the 25th anniversary of the Barcelona Declaration, as it has been mentioned earlier. It's a good time to make, let's see a balance and see what the outcomes of that initiative have been. 25 years is a long enough period to see some results, shortcomings, and to suggest some recommendations to relaunch, to improve what already exists. So where are we coming from? Back in 1995, at that time, 27 countries came together in the city of Barcelona and signed a declaration. In that declaration, they stressed the strategic importance of the Mediterranean. That has not changed. The Mediterranean continues to be a very strategic part of the world, with countries around the Mare Nostrum that share elements of geography, of history, of human contacts, of strategic interests and challenges. That is the other point where those 27 countries that met more or less 25 years ago also stressed that the existence of those common challenges at the different levels, political level, economic and social levels. Now, this is where we come from 25 years later. What did the Barcelona Declaration what did it aim at? It aimed at creating a Euro-Mediterranean partnership. The idea of having a Euro-Mediterranean area with a very revolutionary approach at the time, because it was considered that that partnership could only come into existence as a result of a comprehensive cooperation. The existence of different tracks or pillars of the partnership, the political, the economic, the human and social. The main objectives that were stated at the time were the following. First of all, to establish a common area of peace, stability, and shared prosperity. This is a sentence that we've heard time and again for the past 25 years, to have this common area of shared peace, stability, and shared prosperity. Also, to put in place a Euro-Mediterranean free trade area. The project, or the idea, the goal, was to establish it by the year 2010. So that was in 15 years after the launching of this initiative. Also, another goal was to work towards the strengthening of democracy and respect for human rights. So, to do different things required, the different pillars, to achieve that goal of more democratic governance and human rights and respect for human rights in the region. And finally, another goal was to develop a partnership for greater understanding and for closeness between people. This is important. Bring people around the Mediterranean closer, understanding among different countries, cultures, religions, civilizations, to create those types of bonds now that we're talking about it. So 25 years later, where are we now? Okay, so the question is, have these objectives been achieved? Well, I think a sober analysis of the situation tells us that none of those objectives has been fully achieved. And in fact, most of them, the most important ones, have not only not been achieved, but the shortcomings are enormous. And some of the challenges that already existed back in 1995 have grown bigger, and those challenges are facing the entire region in more acute forms. If we look at the situation 2021, if we look at the conflicts that already existed by the time of launching the Barcelona process, most of them, if not all of them, still continue, regional conflicts. If we look at a number of wars and civil wars or foreign interventions around the Mediterranean Sea, have been on the rise. The number of failed states has also increased around the Mediterranean. And some of the phenomena that were created by these tendencies, like refugees, asylum seekers, internally displaced people, have grown. It has been mentioned earlier that inequalities, both between both rims of the Mediterranean and within countries bordering the Mediterranean, have grown larger. And there are issues of human rights and lack of freedoms, political freedoms, and also illiberal trends. If we look at the EU in some countries and within societies, illiberal trends. Now, I referred earlier to to bringing societies closer, to create that sense of closeness between peoples. If we look at the emotional gap between Europe and its southern neighbors, many would argue that has been widened. It has grown over the past 25 years for different reasons. Now, considering the goals that were stated in the Barcelona Declaration, it is undeniable that both the EU and the southern and eastern Mediterranean partners have not been successful in transforming the region in a positive way. Now, that failure, that sense of failure, has generated a profound feeling of fatigue and even frustration. Among people who've been following these issues for a long time, like things are not moving forward the way they were expected, and there's some sense of hopelessness. Now, the context has not helped for many reasons. The collapse of the Israeli-Palestinian peace process, that started in the early 90s here in the city of Madrid. The tensions, the acute tensions at the regional level in the Mediterranean, in the Eastern Mediterranean, with the intervention of so many regional powers and also global actors. The EU-US policies in the region have not helped, both being erratic policies and military adventures. We're thinking about the invasion of Iraq 2003 and the aftermath of all that, and the concatenation of global and European crises that were mentioned in the previous session, ranging from the financial crisis 2008 to the Brexit in Europe, to COVID, the pandemic, and also the Arab uprisings that initiated in 2011 and have continued ever since until nowadays. Now, one of the main reasons behind the inconsistencies between the discourses, creating a common area of shared prosperity, democracy, human rights, so those are the discourses, and actually this was the declaration that was voluntarily signed by those 27 countries at the time, and the number increased with the passage of time. So the inconsistencies between those discourses and the policy outcomes is to be found in what we call a widespread oversimplifying idea. And that is the perceived dilemma between values and interests. This dilemma has been present in the policy debates and circles in academia. So values and interests, according to this dilemma, clash, and one has to choose. The EU, according to this approach, has been trapped because, on the one hand, if it wanted to be true to its values, then it would have to press for genuine democratic reform. But if, on the other hand, it tried to defend its immediate interests, then it would have to maintain friendly relations with autocracies in southern and eastern Mediterranean countries. However, for many years now, the problem of the definition of interests, how we define interests, has generated a false dichotomy between security and democratization in Europe's Mediterranean neighborhoods. Who defines interests? Are they short-term interests, or are we investing in long-term goals, and how to achieve those goals? Needless to say, non-democratic regimes are comfortable with that dichotomy, and they actively promote it. Now, in short, so while the EU has presented itself as a transformative power, the Barcelona Declaration had an enormous potential to transform the region, and while its partners in the region agreed in principle with the transformative agenda back in 1995, the reality is that policies supporting the authoritarian stability paradigm, have contributed decisively to strengthening actors that favored the status quo. Now, let me finish with two ideas. All this that's mentioned so far has led to a deteriorated form of stability around the Mediterranean, to a lack of economic progress, to rising inequalities and social unrest, that we've seen some of the manifestations of the social unrest in the region, and also to the instrumentalization of identity and fear politics to hide the inability to respond to the demands and needs of the citizenry in the region. This is a bleak image that I portrayed, and yet, this is an important part that will lead us to the second section of the introduction of this report. Alluding to this hostile context should not prevent the advocates of a stronger and wider Euro-Mediterranean relations to critically reassess the priorities and tools to identify what has failed and the extent to which alternative pathways can be explored.
Thank you very much for this brief but yet introductory and interesting overview of the past 25 years of Euro-Mediterranean relations. You've drawn a quite sober image of Euro-Mediterranean relations in the past, so I'd now like to hand over to Eduard, because the second part of the title is Creating Euro-Mediterranean Bonds That Deliver. So first of all, what are bonds that deliver? Which different bonds, which different futures can we imagine for Euro-Mediterranean relations to turn a little bit the tide, to change the relations of the picture that Haitham has just drawn? How to stay positive? Please give us some hope.
Well, in fact, that fact of thinking about the future infuses some sort of positive energy into the conversation. Because unless the people that are listening to us believe in faith, the future, we are able to change it. Our actions or inactions will bring us closer to one or another future. So this is the element where we can bring some positive energy to Haitham's and the report's rather gloomy diagnosis about where are we. In that sense, the report presents three alternative scenarios. The three of them are possible, and they result from the combination of two uncertainties. Will the bonds around the Mediterranean be stronger or weaker? And the second, if those bonds are still strong, which kind of bonds will we have? Will they be these bonds that deliver, that we have in the report, or will these bonds be too tight, oppressive, not allowing us to move? So let's start with that scenario which may be less thought about, which is the scenario of bonds that are looser, that are too loose, under which conditions we could get there in 10 years' time. Well, this may start with the persistence of some sort of Mediterranean fatigue, where there is the feeling that we don't advance, that this is too much of an investment for the results we obtain. And then because of this fatigue, we may dangerously get closer to some sort of Mediterranean amnesia, where we forget about the Mediterranean. Europeans forget about the Mediterraneans, but the countries and societies in the North Africa and the Middle East also think less about the Europeans as a model, as a partner, as someone with whom they could work together. So that would be this idea of the bonds that are too loose, and then where societies are more inward looking or just look elsewhere for partners. But let's imagine, because we think, and this is something we say in the report, that the geographical proximity, but also the depth and intensity of interpersonal relations around the Mediterranean may, let's say, support the idea that those bonds will stay there, that it won't be that possible to soften these bonds. But there could be very different kind of bonds. We can imagine different relations in 10 years' time. Let's start with the most negative one, so that then we can think also about how we could get to a more positive one. So what do we mean by bonds that are too tight? It means that we care about the other, we look at the other, but generally with negative lenses. We think in terms of threats, of hostility, of risks. And in that conditions, yes, the Mediterranean, in that case, states, will continue to work together, but generally in a very transactional manner and focusing mainly on issues such as terrorism, border control, and these kind of things. Not very promising, isn't it? But if we don't change course, that's the scenario we may be heading to. But we could think of different kinds of relations. These are the bonds that deliver. What should happen for this to become true? I mean, and it's possible. And it's possible because there are elements there that tell us that this could happen. First, we should stop being hopeless. So we need to have hope, desire, and ambition for change, recuperating somehow the idea that the Mediterranean can be a space for transformation and cooperation. Second, we also need to realize that some of the challenges that we are facing, environmental crisis, climate change, the post-pandemic recovery, they can be more easily addressed together. And third, it cannot be the result of just one enlightened leader or the result of a summit, but more the result of many actors, drivers of change that daily create these bonds to deliver. This report, in fact, aspires to echo some of those voices, some of those actors that can infuse this positive change, emphasizing the idea that change is needed, that change is possible, and that change is worth investing in.
Thank you very much, Eduard, for this enthusiastic transition. And without further ado, I'd actually like to hand over to Sana, because you are part of those, yes, Actors for Change. Womanpreneur Initiative is, as I said, 5 years old. What is your reaction to this picture of the past Euro-Mediterranean relations of the past 25 years that has been drawn, the different scenarios for the future that Eduard just presented? What does this inspire you? Are you hopeful? Do you see this change, this path already being prepared? What is your impression on the ground?
Thank you so much, Carmen. I'm very happy to be here with you. I think I can only be hopeful, otherwise I wouldn't be here. And I think there is really very little I can add to already the intervention of Haitham and Eduard. But I think for me, the way I see the relation between the south and the north of the Euro-Mediterranean is actually to look at three important things. First, economic development and progress between the two regions, the north and the south. Second, the human dignity. And the third, the political stability. I think these are three important focus areas for the relations to develop, at least from my point of view. But I think with the context of COVID and with all the impact, whether negative or positive, that happened in this 1 year, I think more than ever, and as the report says, a moment to reflect. I think it's a moment to reflect about our empathy, about our sympathy as humans. And I think only by that we can actually move forward, change, progress together. I think more than ever, we need to rethink the relationship between the region, because as I mentioned, North and South, and I wanted to kind of a little bit attract your attention, because the idea is to create a bond between the Euro-Mediterranean and not still call it North and South. However, this is still happening. I mean, the South is still receiving lessons from the North. The North is still viewing the South as less, I would say. And I think we need to rethink about these relationships. We need to think about first, our economic and political kind of strategic objectives, and to think about the humanity that actually creating the bond between the two regions. And only by that we can move forward for a better economic situation, but also a better situation for our humanity. Today, the migration crisis is becoming a hot topic more than ever. Political instability between different countries. I don't want to kind of dig into that, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. I think probably, as the report says, this is the time for us to reflect and to move forward and to see what have we failed, and how we can move forward from those lessons, what we can do better. So this is basically just my short reflection about your intervention. Now I will move forward to my focus area and my expertise, which is women. During COVID, Womenpreneur, the organization that I run since 2015, basically it was created in 2016. So far we have actually trained 15,000 women. I just want to inform you about that. And we have been very, very busy and very active during COVID. And it was for us really a moment and a time to reflect, but also to assess the situation of women. We are talking about a region where women comprise more than 50%. However, they are still marginalized. They don't have access to opportunities. They don't have access to, I would say, even legal rights in certain countries and the Southern Mediterranean region. So for us, it was a moment to actually reflect on what can we do as an organization, as a civil society. What are the small actions that we can put in place to support women? This is why we created a virtual space where today we gathered 6,000 women around the region to learn about digital opportunities, to create a new economic jobs and new economic employment according and based on the context of COVID. But also it was a moment for us to actually advise decision makers, national and local authorities about what to do to move forward and to support women during times of crisis. And we are actually publishing by the end of this month, like on actually tomorrow, our paper on the impact of COVID on female-led businesses in the region. I hope it will serve as lessons and also as actions for you to take to make sure that every woman is involved, whatever the crisis is. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your input, Sana. Thank you for being here. And we've been talking about all those bonds. I just intend to give you a short glimpse of the different bonds, the different areas we've been looking at. We've been looking at political bonds, generational bonds, urban bonds, migratory bonds, security bonds, and economic and environmental bonds. Once you've had a look into the report, you will discover various interviews from very different with very different backgrounds, actually, from both shores of the Mediterranean. You will find a former expert of the International Labour Organization, Asita Berra, historian and philosopher Kurt de Boeuf. You will find awarded filmmaker Waded Khattab with For Summer, the founder of the Tunisian Parliamentary Monitoring Organization, Selim Kharat, comic artist Raphael Macaron, food blogger Anthony Rael, Shams El Khoneimi, who founded the music band Syrians Got Talent in Brussels, and many more. You see that this is only the start of the Euro-Mediterranean dialogue, and this is also why I'm now opening up our panel, because really our intention is not to remain or to keep this dialogue between the four of us, to involve you digitally, and once we can also to have physical meetings again, because as Eduard said, we have this hope for positive impetus. And with further ado, I'm looking forward to the questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carmen. And thank you, all of you. But we have some questions from the audience, if you don't mind. For example, from Jaime, he said, don't you think that a change of political system is needed first, especially in the Mediterranean countries, so that the institution change personal? For example, Sana, if you don't mind.
Thank you. You couldn't ask me a better question than that.
I knew it.
Thank you so much. For me, it's first about changing the social mindset of the countries. It's very important before we change any kind of systems, political system, economic system, we need to shake and to change the mindset. That's the basis for me, because I think if you want to kill the devil, you need to look at its roots, not its branches. So I think it's very important to actually create the right mindset and then put in place the right institutions.
Much, Sana. And the other one, this is from Akmal. And she said, Euro-Mediterranean dialogue is often perceived as a one-way street running vertically from north to south. How can we rebalance the dialogue towards a more horizontally oriented one? Who want to answer this?
I could.
Okay, let's do it.
So the first thing is that in this, now with COVID, it has become more and less evident, but there are lots of restrictions of mobility. So for this dialogue to happen, people need to be able to move around. So this is a first start. I mean, those that are to be engaged in the dialogue on how to rethink Euro-Mediterranean relations should be able to meet physically and to create these horizontal bonds that it's being asked. But then we also need the different organizations, and this goes from central governments to cities to business communities, civil society, artists, thinking also in Mediterranean terms. Generally, we think as Spaniards, as Europeans, as Moroccans, as Arabs, but we don't always think Mediterranean. And this is something that needs to be, it's kind of Mediterranean mainstreaming, if you want. This is possible. And in which circumstances thinking Mediterranean makes sense. And there are many where it does.
Yes, if I may add a comment on this. We know that the pandemic has aggravated many of the existing dynamics worldwide, and in the Mediterranean region as well. That's a reality. So if we see that by the beginning of the last decade, in 2011, millions of citizens around the Mediterranean, especially in the southern and eastern Mediterranean, took to the streets asking for changes in their systems of governance, changes in the way their states function, asking for institutions that deliver, that take care of the citizenry, that provide opportunities, services. If we look at what has happened over the past decade, so that's also 10 years from the beginning of these mobilizations, and how they did not stop until the pandemic hit the Mediterranean and all the restrictions of mobility, of confinement, stopped those mobilizations in several of the countries. That tells us already that there's a sense of citizenship, people demanding rights, opportunities, for institutions to function, for individuals to be able to create their own life cycles in more satisfactory ways. That links to what Sana was saying. People that are more connected to the outside world due to the use of technologies, to other things, that there's a mindset change that is slowly taking place, and that people are asking for more representative systems of governance. This is what the entire region, with institutions, with organizations, with the states, with governments, NGOs, foundations, think tanks, should be looking at, and looking at those positive trends and the potential for positive transformation.
To round off our debate, I would like to allude to one of the interviews I had the chance to have with a Lebanese food blogger, with Anthony Rael, and he told me that particularly if you put different Mediterranean people around one table, if we eat together, if we share a meal, we'll have a memorable time together. So I would like to ask each of you, what do you see as the main ingredient in terms of what do we really need to put, what is the magic recipe for Euro-Mediterranean bonds that deliver? Only one ingredient.
Please, quickly, we have 1 minute for that.
For me, it's empathy. I mean, you need to care about the other.
For me, I would say collective responsibility.
And for me, it's knowing each other. That links to the empathy that's generated once you know each other and you start building bonds.
Thank you very much. That sounds like a very appealing recipe. And with that, we are looking very much forward to continue our dialogue. And I'm handing over to Esther. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Carmen. Thank you all for this intense and interesting debate. Taking advantage of the moment and having in mind that we are broadcasting from the capital of Spain, we could not miss this opportunity to show you our magnificent city, Madrid, of course. Therefore, for the next 25 minutes, we want to share you the following video, a virtual guide tour in Madrid, rediscovering the Mediterranean.